I didn't talk to my doctor because I knew what my doctor was going to say. You know what he's going to say too, right? It's going to, oh, no, no, you don't want to do that keto thing. You can never stick with that, and it's not good for you. You don't want to eat meat. You want to eat a plant-based diet. But I thought, okay, I can manage this. So I went back on the SGM. I'm supplementing with electrolytes and all kinds of stuff. So I think I'm good. I'm good. And my birthday came along, and I think I was down to about 120, which is October. Uh, and about a week into October, well, actually, a couple of days into October, I started feeling kind of funny. I started getting kind of nauseous and headachy and no energy, and it just kept. And I thought, oh, I got keto flu, so make sure I get lots of supplements. So I had the no salt, which is the potassium chloride, and I took that and sodium chloride, and made sure, and I had lots of drinks of the supplement, but it just kept getting worse and worse. And I think around about the 6th of October in 2018, I started.
Dave, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, I'll give you the 3-word answer, the short answer, which is Professor Bart K. Uh, that's not going to make for a terribly long conversation, though. So I'll start sort of at the beginning and give you a little bit of personal history. Now, I grew up. I'm a child of the 50s and 60s, and I grew up with father who was very much into physical fitness. He got his Bachelor of Science in PE at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and then he got the physical education director's job at the YMCA here in Victoria. And he was always arranging fun runs and track meets and gymnastics events and wrestling events, and he was always in the media. Um, so every couple of months there was something on, and he was talking to the local press about it. It was kind of funny. Back in the 60s, he once got stopped by police because he was running downtown. He'd gone out for his daily run at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the police stopped him and wanted to know what he was running from. I mean, that's how common running was back then. Anyway, so he encouraged us to be very, very active as well, and we all got taught to swim at a very young age. He encouraged us through high school to participate. So I started running cross country and track meets and that sort of thing. But I'm only 5'4" and not terribly big, so I wasn't particularly competitive. But just to show you that you can't outrun a bad diet, because my dad was a product of the 50s and 60s, so he was into the high carb, calories in, calories out model, and believed that the way to do it was eating whole foods, but exercising. So he was consuming potatoes and rice and pasta just like everybody else. And in 1967, he got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. He was only 38 years old. So, of course, by extension, I realized that this was a path that I could go down as well. Now, he talked a lot about what he called reduced morbidity. And the idea there is you want to not just to live as long a life as you can, but be as healthy as long as you can. And as he said, the ideal thing is that you'd be crossing the street at 97 and get hit by a bus, and that would be the ideal reduced morbidity. So in 1971, we moved to Edmonton from Victoria, and he got his master's and his PhD in physical education and recreation and how to manage recreation programs. Got his PhD, went to the University of Alberta, and ran the recreation program for staff and faculty for 25 years. And again, he was arranging public family skates and fun runs and all those kinds of things, and always in the press as well. Um, he also, right up into his 60s with my mom, even at 65, they were participating in national roller skating championships down in the States. But we realize it now because we didn't, we saw hints, but we didn't realize what it was until in 1995, 96, when he moved back to Victoria, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And the Alzheimer's got progressively worse. And in 2007, he was put into a long-term care facility and spent the last 8 years of his life in a long-term care facility. So he didn't get what he wanted, was the reduced morbidity, and strictly a result. Well, there were some mitigating factors. As a late teen and a young 20-year-old, he did some semi-professional boxing, so he was taking a few jabs to the head, and I think he liked his evening glass of wine a little too much. And then you combine that with 30 plus years of diabetes, and it just progressed into type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's. And it was painful watching him slowly decline over 7 years to the point where he was just vegetative, lying in a chair, drooling and being fed by a nurse. And the father I knew was gone 7 or 8 years before that. You couldn't have a conversation with him anymore. Anyway, so that's sort of my background. So look at me. Back in 1998, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes myself. I was 48 years old at the time, no, 45 years old at the time. And we were participating in a Joslin School of Medicine, the diabetes school was part of Harvard. They were doing a study on families who have diabetes. And of course, our family, my uncles, my aunts, my dad, all had diabetes at various stages. So what they did is they brought us, and we had to agree to this. We went in and we all did a glucose tolerance test. And I went to the local clinic and had a 2-hour glucose tolerance test done. Didn't think much of it. 2 days later, I got a call from Joslin School saying, you better get your butt in to see your doctor because your glucose response was right off the scale. So sure enough, I went to my doc, diagnosed with type 2, and of course they put me on, I think at the time they put me on gliclazide and metformin. Those were the two drugs they seem to use most commonly. And at first, everything worked great. I went away and I started taking the metformin. I started cutting out sugar and other things like that. And my weight came down 20 or 30 pounds. My A1C came down. Doc said, hey, you're the poster boy for Canadian diabetes. But it didn't last. Then it never does. And after about a year or two, it kind of plateaued out. And you just sort of, you take your medicine in the morning. You only take your blood once a day, which is first thing in the morning, because that's what the doctor told you to do. And the weight started to creep back on, and my A1C started to climb. And after a while, they put me on an SGLT2 inhibitor. I think Forxiga is one of the brands that is that, and it's a medication that works on the SGLT protein in your liver to your what would or sorry, not your liver, in your kidney. Your kidneys would normally, as the blood's going through it, they pull out the sugar and don't let it be excreted. It gets pumped back into the bloodstream. Um, and what the SGLT2 inhibitors do is they basically act on the kidney to dump the excess sugar into your urine and you pee it out, which is rather ironic because when my dad first went for his diabetes, they didn't have the blood meters. How did you do your blood? You peed on a stick. So, so here we are, 30 years later, it's the reverse. If I'm peeing on a stick and getting good sugar readings, obviously I'm dumping a lot of sugar. Anyway, so that went on for a while, but um, I had a job that got me up at 7 in the morning, and I worked until 5 in the afternoon. So it was a real stretch to try to force myself out of bed at 5 in the morning to go over to the gym. And by the time I got home at 5 o'clock, I was just too tired. I've never been an evening person for exercise, so the exercise kind of disappeared. Uh, but the only exercise I got was in the mid 90s. Uh, we formed a pickup hockey team, and we go to the local rink down the street there at midnight and play hockey for 2 hours. And of course, in the process of doing that, I broke my collarbone, I broke my leg, I took a puck in the mouth. So that stopped. Um, but so, sort of fast forward to um, 2018 or well 2009 when I retired. And at the time I retired, my weight had gone from, well, it was 120 when I was in my teens. It had gone all the way up from about 140, which would have been in my mid 20s, all the way up to 180. Now, 180 pounds doesn't sound like much to somebody who's 6'5", but I'm only 5'4". So that comes with quite a belly. So in 2009, I thought, okay, I'm retiring now. I don't want to go the way my dad goes. I don't want to get Alzheimer's. I don't want to have a heart attack or a stroke. So I'm going to do what my dad suggested, which is exercise, because that's how you got rid of weight, right? So I went to the local gym and I started swimming. And I had to ditch that after about a year because the chlorine in my nose combined with um, shoulder pains from the overhead. So I had to stop that, and I thought, okay, what else can I do? So I thought, I'll go up to the gym, and I found one of the Concept 2 rowing machines. I'm a big fan of Sean Baker. Um, and whereas I'm not a big guy, I'm never going to make any records rowing. What I could do is I had pretty good stamina. So I'd get on the rowing machine and I started off slow, but after a couple of years, I was going over 4, 5, 6 times a week, sometimes twice a day. And I'd go over in the morning at 7 o'clock and I wouldn't get off the rower until 11. So it was like 4 hours on the rower. And in the height of all that, in about 2016, over the course of 1 year, I rode 11 million meters or 11,000 kilometers. Yeah, it was like, just to give you a perspective, I tracked myself on a map of Canada and the States, and I started in Victoria and I rode all the way to St. John, Newfoundland, all the way down the East Coast to Florida, out to the Keys, all the way back across the south of the States, and then up the West Coast. And that was about 10,000 miles. So and that was done in 1 year. So in 1 year in virtual rowing, I rode right around North America. So, and the problem there was while I was rowing, I was able to drop a lot of weight. I got down from my 180 down to about 135 pounds, something like that. But invariably what would happen, you exercise that much, you start suffering from overuse injuries. So I'd start getting back pain, shoulder pain, tendonitis in my elbow, tendonitis in my wrists. I had something with this finger here, which was called now lock something, where if I go to open the finger, it kind of snaps. It doesn't see normal finger just like that, but this one kind of snaps as I open it. And every time I did that, um, I'd have to stop rolling because uh, I wasn't a competitive athlete. I'm not going to put myself in more danger and risk a serious overuse injury. So as soon as I started getting tendonitis and whatever, I got to stop now. And yeah, and I'd stop for 3 or 4 months. And of course, I'd go to the physiotherapist and they do some ultrasound and a bunch of massage, and then they'd give me a whole bunch of resistance band exercises that I was to do. And over a course of 4 to 5 months, it would gradually ease. Never quite went away, but it would ease up on me, and to the point where I go, okay, I can start rolling again. But by then, I'd be back up at 165 pounds. So I'd put 25 to 30 pounds on in that 4 to 5 months. Then I'd get back on the rowing machine and I'd do the same thing again for another 6 months until the next one happened. But the shoulder or my left shoulder injury came back to haunt me as well. From hockey, in that what I found was that when I tried to raise my left arm, I had shoulder impingement. So I'd sort of get it up to about there, and then it would be extremely painful to try to get it straight over my head. And one of the things that I think is kind of funny is, you've heard the old hammer and nail thing, eh? To every carpenter, every problem is a nail, and every solution is a hammer. And the same thing is true for the medicine field, right? Because I go to the chiropractor and, oh yeah, well, you need to have your back cracked, your back's out of alignment, we can fix that. And I go to him, maybe something, but it didn't really fix it. And then I go back, oh well, we'll send you to the massage therapist, she'll give you a shoulder massage and fix that. And that wouldn't work. So then I went to my doctor. Oh, yes, that's a trigger point. We can do dry needling, which is a form of acupuncture, just in the doctor's office instead of at a Chinese herbal medicine clinic. And then you go to the physiotherapist. Oh, no, you need ultrasound and you need to do this, you need to do that. But it never fixed it, right? So there were two seminal moments for me, two epiphanies, if you like. And the first one happened, I just happened to be going through YouTube and watching various clips. And there was this clip that intrigued me. It was titled Sugar, the Bitter Truth. And it was Dr. Lustig. And I watched the whole thing. The more I watched it, the more fascinated I was by this, because this was information my doctor never told me, right? He never, he said, yes, you got to cut out sugar, but he never said, well, grains are sugar and potatoes are sugar and rice is sugar and pasta is sugar. It's all sugar, right? He never said that. He just said, you need to cut out sugar. So like most people, you figure you need to cut out added sugar. So, start putting Splenda in your coffee instead of sugar, and, don't drink orange juice. You're going to eat have an orange, eat an orange and take the pulp, and don't eat the orange juice and don't have the apple juice. The obvious sources of sugar. And I stopped. I switched from Coke. I loved Coke. I switched from Coke to Diet Coke, and it didn't really make any difference. But when I saw watched this article that Lustig had, I thought, okay, I'm going to try this. And he was talking about low carb. So I started. I'm a very curious individual. I don't mean by curious as a boy, are you weird? I mean curious as in I like to learn things, and I kind of have an engineer in me, and that I like to. How does this work? Why does this work? And so I started, I took the red pill and I started down the keto pathway, looking at a whole bunch of people. I think I ran across Eric Berg. The one that really intrigued me was Jason Fung, uh, and I've got all of his books now. Uh, talking about low carb and sugar and fasting and whatever. Uh, and Ken Berry was one of the first ones I bumped into. In fact, so long ago, I think this is probably September of 2018, that Ken Berry was only just investigating carnivore. In fact, I watched him when he said, "I'm going to try a 1 month test of carnivore." And that would have been about probably January of 2019 or December of 2018. Anyway, so I thought, okay, I'm going to switch over, and I started doing everything low carb. And I couldn't believe it. I was 150 pounds when I started. I just finished about a month and a half on the rowing machine, but I started low carb on the 1st of September 2019. And uh, over the next 2 weeks, I went from 150 pounds to 125 pounds. It was 10 plus pounds a week. Now, I didn't do this for weight loss. I did this for my health. And it's always been about my health, not my weight. I don't really care about my weight. My weight is what it is. But it dropped down. But at the same time, uh, my blood glucose, my A1C, plummeted as well. It went from over 10 down to about 7.5 in about 6 or 8 weeks. But I could see my daily readings were dropping, and to the point actually where I was going hypoglycemic from some of the medications I was taking. So I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna drop all my meds, and I did that about the second week in September. And then I saw my blood readings starting to come a little high again, and I thought, well, I'll start the Forxiga again, the SGLT2 inhibitor, because it seems to be pretty good at bringing down the blood glucose. So I started it again, and sure enough, my blood readings came down again. Uh, Now, one of the big mistakes that I think I made was I didn't talk to my doctor, because I knew what my doctor was going to say. You know what he's going to say too, right? It's going to, oh, no, no, you don't want to do that keto thing. You can never stick with that, and it's not good for you. You don't want to eat meat. You want to eat a plant-based diet. But I thought, okay, I can manage this. So I went back on the SGM. I'm supplementing with electrolytes and all kinds of stuff. So I think I'm good. I'm good. Um, and my birthday came along, and I think I was down to about 120, which is October. Uh, and about a week into October, well, actually, a couple of days into October, I started feeling kind of funny. I started getting kind of nauseous and headachy and no energy, and it just kept. And I thought, oh, I got keto flu, so make sure I get lots of supplements. So I had the no salt, which is the potassium chloride, and I took that, and sodium chloride, and made sure, and I had lots of drinks of the supplement, but it just kept getting worse and worse. And I think around about the 6th of October in 2018, I started throwing up, and I couldn't even keep the supplements down. I was throwing up all day long. I had a fever, sweating like a pig. Uh, and so we went to bed that night, and my wife, I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning to throw up several more times. And my wife said, "That's it. We're going to the hospital." So gets me a little choked up when I think back on it. But she, she took me to the hospital, to the emergency ward, which is fortunately only about 2 blocks from our place. And uh, the original guy that looked at me said, "There's nothing wrong with him. Why are you wasting emergency?" And so she had to explain, well, this is happening, and one of the more senior doctors came in and said, "Oh, no, 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 get him in right away. You're suffering from ketoacidosis." So, so for everybody that tells you you can't get ketoacidosis while doing keto, yes, you can. Now, there are some mitigating circumstances, but you can. And that ties back to the mistake I made of not going to see my doctor. Okay. So they brought me in. Well, later on that evening, my wife said that uh, doctor had told her if I'd waited another 12 hours, they'd have taken me right into the ICU. Yeah. So I spent 5 days in hospital while they pumped me full of saline and tried to uh, get my electrolyte balance gone. And interestingly, I look back at this and I have to laugh because I went in there the week or two before I went in there. My blood levels were averaging around about 4.7 to 5.7. That's mini moles, so you make the conversion, which is perfectly within the 4 to 7 range, right? So I go into the hospital, and the next day they bring me out breakfast, and what do I get for breakfast? Let me see. I get a muffin. I get some cereal with skim milk, 4 slices of orange, um, um, a thingy of skim milk, um, and then they come in about because they were coming in every couple of hours to check my blood glucose because, of course, that's part of the problem. Now, the kind of ketoacidosis that you get as a type 2 diabetic is something called or euglycemic DKA, which normal ketoacidosis, which type 1 diabetics are prone to, has both their blood sugar and their insulin skyrocket. In euglycemic DKA, the blood glucose remains relatively stable, but the insulin skyrockets. In other words, the insulin's not doing anything, but the insulin shoots way, way high. But the blood glucose doesn't shoot particularly high, and so it can be confusing. Anyway, so they come in that afternoon after my breakfast and take my blood. Oh yes, your blood glucose is 15. So she pulls out this needle. I said, "What's that?" "Well, we're giving you a shot of insulin." Now, I hadn't even been on insulin when I was at home. I was just on a couple of pills, right? So they start shooting me up with insulin in the hospital, and every meal is like the breakfast meal. Every meal's got, mashed potatoes and peas, tiny piece of pork or chicken, and then a dessert and skim milk and another shot of insulin to deal with all the sugar in the meal, right? So I was in there for 5 days. So at the end of that, the doctor comes in and she says, "I've got a couple of prescriptions." Oh, yes. When I first went in, they asked all kinds of questions about, well, what were you doing? Right. And I said, well, were you doing anything special? I said, well, I was just doing keto. What they were trying to find out is apparently DKA usually is you get it type 1 diabetics get it when they're trying to lose weight. So they stop taking their insulin, right? And they can lose weight very quickly because insulin's a wasting disease, right? You just waste away. But you also face the possibility of ending up with um, uh, diabetic ketoacidosis. Anyway, so that's what I realized afterwards is they were trying to figure out if was I trying to lose weight? Was I a type 1 diabetic who was trying to lose weight? No, I'm just doing keto. Um, Now I noticed when I was in the hospital, they gave me metformin, they gave me insulin, but they didn't give me my Forxiga. And when I asked them, well, we're putting on different medication. Okay. So 5 days later, I get released, and I think my wife at that point, because she thought it was kind of a crazy diet, um, I think she thought, okay, this is it. He'll go back to normal. Well, no, I didn't go back to normal. I thought, no, I'm giving this keto. I know this is the right thing to do. And so it created a little bit of tension because I just about killed myself. And for what reason, I wasn't sure. Anyway, I started looking into, again, I got home, got my computer out, and I started researching DKA. And I find the result of some studies that were done in, of all places, Japan. Because apparently there were, when this medication was first released, there were about a dozen cases of Japanese men who got DKA as a result of taking this medicine. Now, the Japanese are not, most as a species or as a race, they're much shorter than your average North American, right? And they're also much leaner. Okay, and that is where the perfect storm is. If you're eating very lean, you're a small individual, small frame, low weight, and you're taking an SGLT2 inhibitor, your risk of DKA vastly increases. That was me. No, that's me. Yeah. So um, I obviously I didn't. I haven't taken it. In fact, there is now a note on my medical file at the pharmacy which says do not issue SGLT2 inhibitors. And I pulled out the next time, or when I got home, I pulled out the information. They actually mention the risk of DKA there. So this ties back to what I said about the mistake not going to my doctor. Now, would he have noticed it? I don't think so. Quite honestly, I don't think he would have known that, because you'd have had to have followed this to see it. But I could have at least blamed my doctor for not taking me off it. But I couldn't. I had to blame myself for putting myself back on it. So one of the things that happened when I was in the hospital was that I started to get an issue swallowing, because they were giving me these great big huge um, no, not phosphorus, potassium horse pills to swallow, because they were trying to get my potassium up. And I would get it halfway down my throat and I couldn't swallow it. It was too big. I cut it in half and I was choking on it. And that persisted. I got out of the hospital and it persisted and persisted and persisted. And eventually, about a year later, I actually had to go in and see a gastroenterologist, and they actually scoped my throat um, and discovered that there was scarring in my esophagus because I was suffering from acid reflux, and I had for decades, right? If I go back into the 70s and 80s and 90s, I used to have a glass of water at the table where I was eating, because every now and then I'd get hiccups. And the only way to stop the hiccups was to take a glass of water. And I realize now what it was that food was getting stuck partway down. It wasn't impeding the flow of anything else, but it was getting stuck and causing me to hiccup. And then I'd take the water down and it would flush it down. I'd be okay. But it seemed to have come to a head about the same time as I went into hospital, because I couldn't swallow these pills. So I went to gastroenterologist, and over the course of was it 6 months, they actually did three dilations of my esophagus, my lower esophagus. The fortunate thing is, it was low; it was down here, so the branch to the trachea to my lungs was not obstructed, but below that it was. And it was so obstructed that I couldn't even get water down. So what was happening is saliva was building up my throat, and I then have to spit it out. Um, so they went down, and with a balloon, they went down my throat and they dilated it from, I think it was 10 millimeters up to 15, and that sort of fixed the problem. And of course, the doctor um, said, "Well, we need to put you on a PPI." And I heard Ken Berry talking about PPIs, and I thought, hmm. So I took the prescription from him. I filled the prescription, but then I looked up and I started reading more on PPIs. Things like, they're only supposed to be prescribed. The FDA only ever approved them for 6 weeks with one refill. You're not supposed to use PPIs for the rest of your life. They're only a temporary measure. Um, and I thought, no, I'm not. I'm not going down that road. So I just left them in the cupboard, and the problem went away for about 3 years before it came back. Yeah, so I started following various YouTube influencers. I was following Robert Lustig. I bumped into Ken Berry, um, Jason Fung. Um, there was a group, Becky Gillespie and her husband did one called Two Fit Docs, and I followed them for a while. I followed Thomas DeLauer, Eric Berg, um, and I was watching everything. So over the past 5 years, and I'm going to have to apologize to Bart now. I'm going to use the L word. I literally have watched tens of thousands of video clips because I'm watching an average of 10 to 20 a day, and I watch them 365 days a year for 5 years. That's 15,000, or well, yeah, that's 1,500 days. And at 10 to 20, it could be somewhere between 15 and 30,000 video clips. So I've watched your channel, I've watched the interviews with people who have gone keto and gone carnivore. I've watched, this is what I eat in a day, a whole gamut of videos to do with keto and carnivore. Um, Two guys that I really liked just because of what they're doing is Gary Taubes, and I've got all of his books, and Nina Teicholz for sort of bringing that out so that people know about it. Um, and I've got, you see right behind me here, those are all my keto carnivore books from various authors. Um, and I started weeding some of them out. For instance, Berg, I followed him for a bit, but when he started talking about 8 cups of salad, I went, hell no, I'm not doing 8 cups of salad. I don't eat 8 cups of salad in a week. I'm not starting to eat 8 cups in a day. I hate the stuff. Anyway, so I dumped him. Some of them sort of disappeared. Who else have we got? Oh, Ivor Cummins was another guy I really like, and I still watch him. And Dr. Paul Mason, what a brilliant guy he is! Absolutely brilliant guy. Um, and when I was reading the books by Jason Fung, he talked about fasting, and of course, this was like late 2018, early 2019, and I thought, oh, that's a bit, kind of off base. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. I'm going to eat keto, but I don't think I'll be doing any fasting. But the irony was, the longer I ate that way, the less and less I felt like breakfast. I'd get up in the morning and I realized I'm not hungry. So if I'm not hungry, why am I eating? So what happened is my breakfast just naturally started, it was normally originally at 8 a.m. It went to 9, 9:30, 10. The next thing you know, it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm stopping for a snack. Um, and then I'm having my dinner at 6. So I realized at that point that I was doing like a 21-3 intermittent fast, and I didn't even realize it. Or I don't like to call it a fast because I agree with Bart K. If it's less than 72 hours, it's time restricted eating is what it is. Right. Um, let's move forward to 2021, because in 2021, uh, this is when I discovered Bart K. and had my second epiphany. And the second epiphany, when after watching Bart Kay for a while and watching him debunk all these studies, well, two epiphanies really. One was, I can't trust any study because there aren't any studies that prove anything. None. I mean, you don't need to be a professor to understand that. If the study can't um, be done in a clinical environment with where you control all of the parameters but the one you're testing, then you cannot have causality. And if you can't have causality, then you've got nothing. And virtually all the studies in nutritional epidemiology, they're all retrospective or prospective cohort studies, and they throw the word risk around like it's water, and it means absolutely nothing because there are no studies that prove any diet is effective at anything. And that includes the vegan and vegetarian and Mediterranean diets, none of them. So that was the first epiphany that I got um, from Bart, and which I then begin to realize, oh, okay, I can't trust these studies, so I'm not even going to read them. Or if I do read them, I'm going to start looking for the data and not just reading the conclusion, because the conclusion is basically the conclusion is the position that the investigators are paid to come to. And it's already been paid for, so it's not really much of a conclusion. The second epiphany happened, I guess, probably in the summer of 2021. And that was when Bart Kay came out and introduced the Randall cycle. Now, I told you I'm a curious kind of individual in that I want to understand how things work. And I asked my doctor, I don't know how many times, he said, you got insulin resistance. Well, what is insulin resistance? Right? And how do you get it? Why do you get it? Why is your body doing this? Oh, well, it's just, you've got too much insulin. Well, that's kind of arguing in a circle, isn't it? You've got insulin resistance because you got too much insulin, and you've got too much insulin because you got insulin resistance. So, that's the kind of circular argument that they give you every time you try to say, well, what causes this? Watching him describe the two halves of the Randall cycle and how fat inhibits uh, uh, absorption of glucose, and glucose inhibits absorption of fat, and the two together create inflammation, and they stop. Um, once the cell locks from the inside, it doesn't matter how much insulin is out there. That cell will not take any more glucose in until the glucose levels in the cell drop, which means it has to oxidize that glucose before anything's going to happen. And the fact that it's not pathological, it's physiological. It's the way your body works. It's what is pathological is chronic activation of the Randall cycle. How do you get chronic activation of the Randall cycle? Pour too much glucose down your gob, basically. And when you look at it from that perspective, in my mind, there is absolutely no doubt that he's right, because everything adds up. In all my discussions with doctors and physicians, it never quite added up. There were always blank spots where they couldn't explain it, and this explains it all. And so when I saw that, I thought, well, I've seen enough carnivore people now. I'm starting to see. I don't think you are actually doing your interviews at that point, at least not the way you are now. But I'd seen enough interviews from other people, from Kelly Hogan and from Michaela Peterson and other. Well, let's see, what's the other one? Former fat girl Nicole. I'd seen a lot of interviews, and Sean Baker, because he was interviewing people every day as well. And so I started seeing people coming off everything. They're coming off brain fog. They're coming off um, mental disorders. They're coming off IBS. They're, everything. It didn't matter what you had. They were coming off it. And I thought, okay, I'm not so. Originally, I thought um, Ken Berry was crazy when he was saying, uh, I'm going to try carnivore. Oh, that's bizarre. But the more and more I saw this, the more and more I went, well, is it really bizarre? Because I'm seeing just hundreds, now thousands, tens of thousands of people now that I've seen come on and give their story, and they're all saying the same thing. So I went carnivore on October the 9th of 2021. And now, while I was doing keto and low carb, I did notice there were a number of things that seemed to improve. I noticed that I suffered from lower backache on my right hand side, which I'd had from my early 20s. And I attributed at the time to a really bad mattress that I had that I was sleeping on. But I've been on, good beds for 40, 50 years since then. And it's, every morning I would wake up with an ache in my lower back. And then I noticed that I was, in the mid late 2010s, 2017, 2018, I started noticing I was getting pain in my shoulders. I was getting pain in my fingers and my joints. And when we did a trip across Canada in 2008, I had complained to my doctor about pains in my ribs, and I pointed to my sides and to my sternum and said, right here and over here, I've got pain. And you get your standard doctor reply, well, don't worry about it. It's just arthritis. You're getting old. It's nothing you can do anything about. So, just don't worry about it. I can give you a pill if that'll help. No, I don't think so. Um, so basically, I was starting to get arthritis and I was getting it in my shoulders. And of course, the rowing wasn't helping that until I stopped that. But I went carnivore. Oh, and when I was on keto, I actually got as low as 115 pounds, but that was when I was right out of the hospital, and people were saying, "Boy, you look sick." I had a very pale complexion, so I have the feeling that that was just as a result of being in the hospital and not being well. But my weight stabilized at about 125 when I was on
Well,
keto.
sorry to interrupt, but they'd been poisoning you in the hospital. No wonder.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they were poisoning me. So so what was noticing was that some of the aches and pains were going away on keto. They were diminishing. I suffer from or was suffering from allergies to my cat, which of course gave me asthma. I had congestion in my inner ear. I had congestion in my sinus. I had congestion in my lungs in the morning when I'd get up. All of that kind of stuff eased off a bit. But I went carnivore, and my shoulder, the only thing that was sort of still really lingering um, was a little bit of arthritis and my shoulder impingement, and it would not go away. And I'd just been about 2 years earlier, to around about 2017, I think I'd been to see uh, the physiotherapist for some ultrasound, and um, it was probably early 2022, and I thought, okay, I guess it's time to go back and get some more ultrasound. But it's expensive and my medical doesn't cover it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to wait because I know it's, $80, $90 a session. You go once a week for, 12 weeks. So you're spending $1,200 or something like that over the course of the 12 weeks. So I thought, okay, I'm going to hold off because, it's right after Christmas, that sort of thing. So I put it aside, kind of forgot about it. Uh, and I around about September of 2022, I was reaching up into the top shelf in the kitchen to get out a plate. And I reached up without even thinking about it. I reached up and I grabbed the plate and I went, oh, that doesn't hurt anymore. It was gone. And it had never gone. It had been plaguing me for 25 years since I broke my collarbone in 96. It never went away. It always came back, and it always required, it went away on its own. Now, coincidentally with that, in January of, still there?
Yeah, we had a bit of a freeze there.
Yeah.
So if you could just start from interestingly in January.
Oh, in January of 2022, I started taking the Cerule products. I was taking Stem Enhance Ultra. I was taking 4 a day. And that was about 9 months before I noticed there was no pain in my shoulder. So it's a toss as to whether it was Carnivore that did it or Stem Enhance. I'm thinking it's probably Stem Enhance largely because I'd been Carnivore for over 6 months before I even got to 6 months in the Stem Enhance, and it was another 6 months before I noticed that. But um, okay, so just checking up on my notes here. Ooh,
So
the backside here.
if I could just jump
Yeah.
with a sorry, just a sec. Um, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would go over the symptoms that I had because the funny thing was that um, I was developing symptoms all my life and wasn't even aware of it. Um, and unlike a lot of people, I never had any severe gut issues like IBS or Crohn's or any of those kinds of disorders, other than the normal, that you get, where, one day you seem to have a bit of constipation, and a couple of days later it's diarrhea, that sort of thing. You have that, and I had that most of my life, you know. And in fact, it was funny because when I went on metformin, one of the side effects of metformin is diarrhea. So if I was having one of those days, I'd say, "Oh, I'm having a metformin day." But I started realizing what it was that I had when I stopped having it, and then I'd take a break because usually around about Christmas time, you know, all the festivities, you're going out to parties. We have a standing um, lunch that we do around Christmas time that's a high tea. Well, you cannot do high tea on meat. It just doesn't work. So invariably, you'd have some shortbreads and you'd have, maybe some mince tarts, and of course you have to have, because I'm a British background, you have to have a Christmas pud. Everybody has a Christmas pud, right? You have a Christmas pud? No, not anymore. Yeah. Well, so had to do that. Um, and of course, you have to have a bit of stuffing with the turkey. And so there's about a week period, maybe between Christmas and New Year's. The other thing, of course, that happens here, which doesn't help, is I'm Canadian, of course. So between Boxing Day and the 5th of January, we have the World Junior Hockey Championships. This is where the 18 to 20-year-olds go and play ice hockey, and it can be in Europe, it can be in North America. And we're both avid hockey fans, so we'd always watch that. Well, you're sitting around the TV watching, so of course you got to have a couple, coffee and a couple of shortbreads, and then for supper you don't want to go and make anything, so yeah, just grab a couple of slices of bread, throw some turkey in, put a bit of mayo in, and that was sort of supper. So there was sort of that period. Uh, and it only took that period, 8 to 10 days, and my lower back ache has come back, my shoulder ache has come back, my arthritic joints have come back. I'm doing this, and my knuckles are I can feel the pain in my knuckles, and I'm starting to have congestive issues, and tinnitus. I'm getting more tinnitus. Yeah. So, and it only took, and again, I go right back. I don't have any problems getting right back on the wagon. It's fortunate that way. Once, a lot of people I've heard, they'll fall off the wagon and then it takes them forever to get back on. No, I can get back right on. It's not a problem at all. But it's a real reminder of just how bad the food we eat and how much damage it's doing to us, that in a matter of 7 to 10 days, I can start to receive the return of all of those. And here's a list of things that when I realized when they came back that it was a result of what I was eating. So um, symptoms resolved or vastly diminished since going keto carnivore. Tinnitus. I'm going to go top to bottom. Tinnitus, sinus congestion, lung congestion, asthma, allergies to my cats, lower back pain since my early 20s, shoulder pain, what my doctors like to call trigger points, arthritic joints, shoulders, elbows, hands, knees, and ribs, gastric reflux and heartburn, indigestion, frequent loose bowels, occasional uh, constipation, but mainly it's loose bowels, frequent loose bowels, occasional stomach cramps, gas, burping, athlete's foot, and erectile dysfunction. And I was taking medications for the tinnitus, for my asthma, for my diabetes, for my ED. I was prescribed medication for gastric reflux. Right. I was on a statin for my cholesterol, and I was on a blood pressure med. Right, the standard. So I was probably taking about 8 to 10 medications. Right, just your standard for a 60 plus person. Thing that I am taking now, and I'm 70. The only thing that I'm taking right now is Stem Enhance. That's it. I'm off all of the medications. Um, I listened to Bart. I was doing a consultation with Bart a while back, and I asked him, "Well, what do you need from me in terms of blood work? Because I'll get the blood work done." And he said, "I don't need any blood work from you." I says, "Are you feeling good?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't need any blood work from you." I said, "Oh, okay." So I said, "So basically, what you're saying is, if you're feeling healthy uh, and you're eating a proper diet, then you don't need to stress yourself out over your blood work." And he said, "Yes." And that was a huge load off, because one of the problems that I have is, unlike all these people who went carnivore and saw their A1C drop from 8 or 9 or 10 down to 4.7, I have a great deal of difficulty getting my blood glucose, my A1C, down to 6. Right? It's usually between 6.1, 6.2, right? And I fretted over that because, I would do everything I thought would bring it down. And, the lowest I ever got it to was 6.0, I think, right? And so I talked to Bart about that, and he said, something, there is absolutely no uh, study done anywhere that shows that having a high A1C is problematic at all. He said, what is the problem is if your A1C is as a result of this sort of thing. spike, trough, spike, trough. It's not that your average is going to be maybe 6, right? But you're going to have spikes up into 12 and 15 and troughs down into the 4s. And it's those spikes and troughs that are creating the damage. He said, I don't see anywhere that shows definitively that having an A1C of 6 or 6.5 or 7, if your blood is like that, if it's minor bumps, in other words, you're not having the spike. And that's the way my blood is. I take my blood. I had a CGM for a while when I was worrying about this, and my blood on a typical day's meal never went over 8. Rarely. Most of the times it would go up into the low 7s, and then it would drop back down into the 5s, and then it would sort of stabilize at 5.7, 5.8 uh, until the next meal. So he said, "Don't worry about it." And of course, my cholesterol was high. So when after now, what year was this? 2020, yeah, 2022. So I've been carnivore for about 11 months, and I went to see my doctor because I hadn't had my lipids done recently. And of course, it was all a phone visit. So I went to the clinic. They took the blood, did the blood draw, and the doctor, then I phoned up the doctor for a phone conference. And he says, well, he says, your A1C, he was happy. My A1C was 6.5. He says, that's fine. I know as far as he's concerned, I'm type 2 diabetic. So 6.5 A1C was good. Right. And he said, everything else looks really, really good. He said, however, he said, your LDL is too high. And for high LDL, um, mine was 1.78 millimole, which I think is about 100 it's about 180 or something like that. It's not super high, but it's higher than they like. And he said, I'm going to prescribe a statin for you. So I said to him, politely decline that. I'm, based on what I've read on statins, based on the research that I've done and looking into papers and whatever, I'm going to decline the statin. And his response floored me. He said on the phone, I don't know why you keep coming to me for advice if you're not going to take it. So I took it. I haven't been back. Yeah.
No, just the arrogance of some of these doctors is what floors me, like it's just so frustrating. I'm lost for words. It's just so
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah. Well, this is the same doctor that I didn't go to before I went keto, right? And that was pretty much the reason why, because he's very much old school and is a nice guy. As a friend, he's a nice guy, but he's stuck in the 60s and 70s and 80s when he was trained. And as far as I can tell, he's not progressed. And I'd like to quote, because I put it at the end of the notes here, the advice from Dave Sackett, who is the father of evidence-based medicine. And he says, half of what you'll learn in medical school will shown to be either dead wrong or out of date within 5 years of your graduation. The trouble is, nobody can tell you which half. So the important thing to learn is how to learn on your own. And physicians have forgotten that, right?
Yeah,
And I don't think,
that's a great quote. And yeah, I think the trouble is doctors generally don't know how to think on their own.
no, they don't know how to de-prescribe.
Hmm.
If I'd gone to him at the beginning of keto, he wouldn't have known what medication to take me off first and what medication to take me off second. They're not taught that. What I was going to say is I will cut them a bit of slack because I don't know about in Japan, but in BC here, the doctors are paid by the BC Medicare system, provincial Medicare, and they're not paid on a per hour basis. They're paid on a per patient basis. Okay. And there are set fees for what, if you're dealing with a patient, that has, that you're diagnosing for cancer, or you're doing this procedure or that procedure, you get paid this, right? So if you're a family physician and you're just doing consultations, you're doing differential diagnosis and prescription, there's a set fee, and it's a set fee based on patient. The result is that they're based on 10 minutes. So the doctor has 10 minutes with you. Now, I don't know about you, but 10 minutes to diagnose my problem, look up my medical history to see what meds I've got and what previous symptoms I have, and prescribe medication is going to take most of that 10 minutes up. And by the time you get to the point where you want to talk to them about, well, what about my diet? What about what I'm eating? They're pushing you out the door. It's like they're already walking out the door to their next client. So you're having a conversation with them down the hall, right? So now, fortunately, that's changing. They've come in with a new policy within the BC government that they're going to allow doctors to do 30-minute appointments. But we have a terrible doctor shortage here. They say that 25% of families in BC have no family physician. There just aren't any available. And my doctor is, well, I'm 70 and he's at least 3 years older than me, probably 5 years. So he's going to be retiring soon. And my wife and I will be without a family physician. We'll have to find another one, or hope that one of his fellow physicians can take our client load on. So I'd like to have said, great, you're fired, but then I leave myself without. And the only option, if you can't, is go to a clinic. And the clinics here, like, you line up at 8 o'clock in the morning to get an appointment for later in the day. And by 9 o'clock, all the appointments are gone. So then you have to go back the next day and line up again. So, going to a clinic is an exercise in frustration. And the other thing that they've come up with is through the local telephone company, TELUS. They have something called TELUS My Health, and you can phone in and you can get a doctor online who can be anywhere in Canada. But the thing is that if it's something where you have to go in, then they still have to find a doctor for you that you can see, right? So yeah, it's a real pain in BC right now to get any kind of, and it's only getting worse. I mean, because Victoria, because of its climate, I think you probably know that Victoria climate is very much like, I would say probably England's climate, right? You get some snow, but not very much. Some cold weather, but not very much. And the summers here, I think we get more sun than they do in England. England gets a lot of clouds and a lot of rain. But our summer temperature in Victoria averages about 20 degrees C, or that would be 68 Fahrenheit. And our winters averages about 5 to 8 degrees. We had a real cold snap about 4 weeks ago. It was 10 below. So that's like 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was cold, but that's rare, right? So that's the way it is. Okay.
Yeah. So, how are you eating day to day?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, I did have some notes on that. Okay, so basically, my diet, like yours, it consists mainly of ground beef because I can afford it, right? I can't afford to eat ribeye steaks twice a day, right? Now, I don't know whether I would call myself OMAD or 2 MAD or 1.5 MAD. Yeah, just half MAD. Yeah, because I generally don't eat until before 2 in the afternoon, and the meal at 2 in the afternoon is never a full meal. It'll be more of a snack. I might grab maybe a couple hundred grams of of deli meat or a couple of beef patties, because I cook them up in the oven, and I put them in the fridge, and there's always 8 to 10 uh, hamburger patties and half a dozen boiled eggs, and usually a package of bacon all cooked up. And I just go in there and I grab a couple of strips of bacon and a hamburger and a boiled egg, and that'll be my snack. And then I'll have the main meal at dinner time, and that's when I'll make a meal for myself and a meal for my wife, because I do all the cooking. I always have done. Um, but basically, what happens is if we do get the same thing, which isn't always true, she'll get the meat I get and whatever veg she wants, and I'll just add more meat. Like if we're doing chicken, I'll make her chicken in a salad. I'll put chicken and throw a hamburger patty on the plate, or a couple of strips of bacon, or a boiled egg, or something like that. But basically, it's pretty standard from week to week. Um, so, as I say, mostly ground beef, eggs, bacon, uh, and that's 4 to 5 times a week. I'll have a steak um, once to twice a week. Um, I like lamb, and that's really nice because in Victoria here, we're right on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. And Victoria, Greater Victoria, which is all the four core municipalities, is a population of about 200,000. But if you add the Saanich Peninsula, it's about a half a million. But fortunately, about maybe 15 kilometers, not even that, maybe 10 kilometers west of the city, you get into Metchosin and Souk, and there are a whole bunch of regenerative farms uh, there, and they all, well, one of them is a lamb. I think they're called Perry Bay. It's a lamb. They do sheep. And then there is Still Meadow Farms that do pigs and chickens. There are several. There's Lockwood Farms, which is up the Malahat. They do eggs, and all of these come. And then there is a beef farm up in Comox, which is about, say, 200 kilometers north on the east side of the island, that does beef. And those uh, companies or businesses all do business with my village butcher, whose name is the Village Butcher, um, and it's 3 blocks down the street. So I walk 3 blocks down the street, turn left, I walk a block, and there's the Village Butcher, and in the uh, same building, it's the same room, really, just one end of it, there's another company called The Whole Beast, and they do all the deli meat. And again, they prepare all of their deli meat. So if you want deli meat, but you're not sure what's in it, they can tell you. So I can go and say, okay, well, that's salami there. Is there any sugar in that? What's in that? And they can say, we put this, because we made it in the back, and we smoked it, right? So I can get my deli meat from a reliable source, and I get all of my chicken, pork, lamb, beef from the Village Butcher, who shops from uh, 15 clicks away to 200 clicks away. And I challenge any vegan to say that virtually all of their food comes from within 200 clicks of their home. Right?
Yeah, unlikely. So how have people around you reacted to this crazy way of eating?
Well, initially, as I say, I got a lot of pushback when I first went keto, for obvious reasons. I mean, um, I don't hold it against them for that, because they saw me in hospital nearly die, uh, but I managed to make a recovery okay. So a lot of them were a little bit disturbed with me when I said, no, I'm still doing keto, because I could see it was doing good, even though it went south. And when I realized what the problem was, then I realized, yeah, okay, you know, that could have happened to anybody, not just me. And it wasn't specifically the diet. Yes, it was the diet, but no, it wasn't, because without the medication, I've been on carnivore and keto now for 5 years, carnivore for 2.5, keto for more than 3. And I have never had another incident of ketoacidosis. My ketones are normally, uh, if it's right after I've eaten, they'll be down to point 0.4, point 0.3. When I get up in the morning, they're anywhere from 1.1 to 2.5, depending on what I ate the night before. So no problem there. Now my sister, right during that silliness back in 2020, uh, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and so of course she's trying to get in, and of course everything is shut down. But because it's breast cancer, they were able to sort of push her up the queue, and she got in and started getting treatment for her breast cancer. Um, that was at the point at which I pulled out Jason Fung's The Cancer Code and said, read this, because he goes in to Thomas Seyfried's um, contention um, that cancer is a metabolic disease. I got her on side, uh, and she now knows what I'm doing. She supports what I'm doing. She's having trouble because she loves her salad. So but she has been cutting down. She's cut down on the sugar. She's cutting down on the breads and things like that, and bringing her carbs way, way down. I think she started with chemotherapy. I think she had 13 weeks of chemotherapy, and then there was a month or so, and then they did another round of chemo, and then after that they did radiation, and now she's just in a post cancer management stage where she's just dealing with I guess you can, because they did uh, not a radical, but they did a took out her lymph nodes. Yeah, it took out 12 lymph nodes. They originally thought she had 4 lymph nodes that were cancerous, but when they opened it up, they realized she had 12, so they had to take out. Now, taking out all those lymph nodes and opening her up here has created problems with her arm and nerves and that sort of thing. So she's now taking various medications to deal with that, but she's recovered. So we go out for walks once a week, and I tell her the latest research shows, and have discussions like that, and talk about what she's doing and how she's doing. But no, she's doing fine. So I was quite pleased with that. The other person I got over was somebody I didn't really need to convince much, which is my best friend from high school. He comes over once a week, and this is why I was pointing out the models behind you or behind me. I build. It's why I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube with a YouTube channel and doing all that. I retired. My whole life, all I wanted to do was build models, and I had to work to make money to put food in my mouth. Now I'm retired. I've got 25 years worth of models to build, and at age 70, I'm not sure I've got 25 years left to build them. So I do that. Well, my friend comes over. He likes to build models as well. So we come over and we have a guy's day down in the basement here, um, and chat. Now, in the 70s and 80s, he was into bodybuilding. So he's already familiar about high protein diets, and bulking up and bodybuilding. And he already knows that every time he eats too many carbs, he says, I'll go out and have a hamburger, some chips, and a Coke, and he steps on the scales every day. He says, I'll do that. Next day, I'm up 2 pounds. Abstain for a couple of days. I lose the 2 pounds. The next time I go out, I weigh myself the next day. I'm up 2 pounds, right? So uh, I get support from him. Um, my mom, well, she's stuck. She's stuck in the 60s and 70s. She's 93 now, so I can't really complain to her. She's managed to uh, outlive what most people would have done eating a high carb diet. But I always think it's so funny because I go into the fridge, to get out the milk for tea, and there's bottles of this and bottles of that, and I'm thinking, holy mackerel, that looks like an expensive way to eat, right? But it's not, because I looked at that, people saying, "Oh yeah, it's got to be really expensive eating all that meat." And I said, "Well, not really. For starters, I'm not eating 3 times a day. I'm eating once, one and a half, or twice a day. Um, I'm not like you make a salad, right? You got to buy all the ingredients for the salad. So you buy a tomato, you buy a green pepper, you buy a lettuce, and you buy a couple of carrots, right? So what's the first thing you do? You get your lettuce home, you get it out of the wrapper, you peel off the top 3 leaves of lettuce because they're damaged from being in the store and they're brown. They go in the bin, right? You peel off 3 leaves to form your lettuce. You take your cucumber and you peel off all of the skin, and that goes into the compost, right? And you shave off a few slices, and that goes in. You shave your carrot, so you peel your carrot, all that goes into the compost. You cut the carrot up into, or you grate it right into, and then you throw the end that you can't eat in the bin as well, right? Then the next day, right, you have another salad. You take the lettuce out, you take the top 3 leaves off and throw it in. I figure that the average person probably eats, well, far less than half of that lettuce. Okay. Because if you're like me, you're in a household of 2 people and you eat a salad maybe every other day or every third day, by the time you've done that 4 times, the core of the lettuce is rotten. So you throw that out. So you've thrown away 70% of the lettuce. I routinely throw out half of a cucumber when it's just turning to mush in the meat or the cheese or the veg keeper. So yeah, and then of course, then I look at all the medications that I'm not taking. Um, I've done all of this, by the way, with no exercise. Now I keep meaning to get back. I've got some weights down here that I want to do. I'm not going back to the gym, so I've saved myself a $500 a year membership to the gym because I'm not going to the gym anymore. I've saved myself the $200 for 5 sessions with the personal trainer, which I usually did twice a year. There's another $400 that I'm not spending. Um, so you look at all of that, the meds you're not taking, and I balance that against what? Well, the meat that I buy and the stem enhance. That's it, right? So no, it's not more expensive to.
Yeah. Definitely not. Yeah. And it does sound like a comedy show. Like it sounds so ridiculous when you actually put into words what people are doing day to day with salad preparation, you know? It's just craziness.
Yeah, I didn't think about it until one day I was making her a salad, you see, and I went, hang on, peel these 3 off, throw them in. Okay, 3 days from now, I'm going to have to peel 3 more off and throw them in. 6 days from now, and by 9 days from now, I'll be throwing out the rest of the lettuce because it'll be rotten, and the cucumber will be rotten, and the tomato that I've taken 2 slices off will be all mushy and it'll be disgusting. Throw that out, and then the green onion, I can throw that out as well. And then we go and buy some more. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Someone's watching this and they think, okay, well, I'd love to get my diabetes under control. I would love to, feel better, and I would love to get to the stage where I'm, not spending all the time in the kitchen making a salad. Um, how do I get started? What
Well, I think I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and I'm sort of the viewpoint that it's to a large extent it's going to depend on your personality type. I know that you are an abstainer as opposed to a moderator, right? The only way for you to moderate is to abstain, right? For me, it's for some things, not everything, but for some things, I can moderate. For other things, I'm going to have to abstain. For instance, coffee, chocolate. I love chocolate. And if I have chocolate in the house, I'll eat it, right? I love my coffee in the morning and I love cream in my coffee, even though I know that that cream, I have an intolerance to cream, which is what I think the dairy is what gave me the gastric reflux, and now I have a severely scarred esophagus um, as a result of that. But the only way for me to get rid of the coffee and the cream is just stop cold turkey. I will not be able to do it otherwise. I'm still drinking it, and I keep saying to myself, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. And every morning I start off with a cream and coffee. So for other things, for instance, the leftover goodies from upstairs, when the girls leave home, there'll be a whole bunch of cookies and danishes and stuff like that. They can sit on the counter for days and I won't touch them. So I think it depends. If you're a moderator, then I think that what Bart Kay says is probably the way you should go. Um, don't do it fast, because there can be severe consequences to ripping the Band-Aid off. Um, and they may not happen right away. They may not hit you for 6 months, right? Um, so if you're a moderator and you can do it, what I would do it over 6 weeks. And the way I would see you doing it was, first 2 weeks, cut out all of the processed foods. Just stop eating processed foods. So no more pizzas, no more McDonald's burger and fries, uh, no more fries, right? Um, and try to concentrate on replacing those with whole foods, whether it's meat or whether it's veg. The second 2 weeks, then I start cutting down on the high carb plant foods. So cutting down on the rice, the pasta, oatmeal, all those kinds of things. Cutting down on those to eliminate those within 2 weeks. And again, backfilling with a combination of meat and low carb veg. And then over the last 2 weeks, then start cutting out the the low carb veg. So all your cruciferous vegetables and green leaf vegetables, that sort of thing, eliminate those and replace them with meat. And I think, you know, a sort of a 50-50 by weight, I think, is what is normally accepted. It would be like 65-35 calories. That's for Bart. Um, but if you're not, and I'd give it 6 weeks. I wouldn't do it any less. In fact, I think you'd be better off doing it for 3 months, because it might take you 6 weeks to just to realize the benefit of going from sugar burning to fat burning and settling in. And then you've got another 6 weeks of just eating meat. And if you're still having problems, cut out dairy, cut out, you know, go lion diet if you have to eliminate. But if you find that just the meat diet's working for you, the all meat diet is working for you, then do that for another 6 weeks, and then you've had a 3 month try at it. And if you find there's problems, you've got some time to do some adjusting before you say, hey, this isn't working for me, let's dump it. On the other hand, if you're an abstainer, because you can't moderate, that's going to be very difficult for somebody who uh, has difficulty moderating. You know, telling them, well, you can have your pizzas and your junk food this week, but 2 weeks from now you can't have it anymore. But you can have that other stuff, right? Those people, maybe it is best to just rip the Band-Aid off and go at it and take the chance that you might have a problem down the road. I'd be in myself. I didn't have the problem because, whether I realized it or not, over the 2 years, 2.5 years of being keto, I had naturally done that. I'd moved from a high carb diet to a low carb whole food diet. And so I realized in October, I'm not really eating much plants anymore, so I'm just going to dump the rest of it. Yeah. So that's my advice.
Very nice. So, Dave, a lot of the people that are watching will have interacted with you online, especially in um, Bart's live streams or premieres. Could you tell us how do we recognize you online?
Okay, well, if you look at the title there, I go on Bart K's site as Master Chief Burge, and no, I have nothing to do with the military. I was never in the military, other than my closest link to the military is I like to build military aircraft, sort of 72nd scale military aircraft. But I got that when I joined the Meat Militia, and I had a consult with Bart K a few years back, and he wanted me to do a short video clip for him I think it was to advertise his cerule products. And he made me a moderator of the channel and bestowed upon me the honorary title of Master Chief. So I get to go in there and dole out the discipline to all those latecomers. So if you don't get too late, you get to do dusters, and if you're too late, boy, you're going to be doing latrines. So yeah, so Master Chief Burge. I don't have a YouTube website, unfortunately. I'm too busy with other stuff. I am in the on Facebook as a member of the BC Carnivore website. But if you wanted to get a hold of me, probably the best way would be to uh, either because I watch all of your clips. Every first thing I do every morning, Dave, is I look for what's your latest video and watch that. If somebody wants to get a hold of me and they leave, because I always, one of the first things I do is I click like. Then I start scrolling down while I'm listening, and I'm going like. And then when I see a comment that I want to comment on, then I'll comment on that as well. But it's a guarantee that if somebody wanted to get a hold of me and they just put to at Master Chief Burge, I would, in fact, I would probably get an email because I usually get emails when I do, when I get responses to stuff I put up. So if somebody put a post and put at Master Chief Burge in their the header of their post, it would come to my email. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Yeah. That or come to BC and join BC Carnivores.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us, Dave. I really
Well, if I
appreciate
can
it.
help anybody, that's one of the reasons I decided to come on. Is I've been sort of trolling and watching people for a long time, and I decided it was time to share my story. And if it can help anybody, great, because I'd love to see this continue to go.